Welcome in. It is Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing on Sirius XM NASCAR Channel 90. I'm Chris Childers. We have a great show planned for you today. The fabulous Jeff Burton is going to join us, NASCAR legend who won 21 Cup races. That's a lot in his career. We have him on, who was with Roush from 96 to 2004, nearly a decade. We're into playoff mode now. We're coming off our final race of the regular season. It was admittedly a bummer. We all wanted to see the number 17, Chris Buescher, on our end get in. It did not happen. Had a bunch of new winners this year. We had 15 race winners. So kind of crazy to think how it all went down, but now it's all focused on the 6. Now everybody's looking to see what Keselowski can do as the 8 seed, but Kevin Woods joining me today. Kevin, we're going to bring in Jeff Burton with us in a second, but quickly, let me talk to you. How is the attitude around the shop right now? Certainly happy with the 6 and a good position as the 8 seed.
Disappointed, I
but
think,
a bummer not seeing Chris in the playoffs.
You put me on the spot with that. I think people they're disappointed. I think
you can handle it. I promise.
You're
there every day.
If you watch the race, Chris was pretty much locked into on the points until he wasn't. Right, a handful of laps to go. So pretty much the whole season, pretty much the whole race, it looked pretty good, and then there was a little bit of a shuffle at the end. But I think if you would have asked people over there, everybody, you know the rule structure, and you knew, when you go into a sporting event like that and you need help, that you might not always get it. And in this instance, he did. Not only did he not get help, he kind of got hurt. So unfortunately, that's the way the cookie crumbles. But it's 26 races, and you missed it by 6 points, and that's kind of the way you have to look at it.
It's a bummer. Well, we got Jeff Burton here today, who can talk about that and talk about his career, because he is an NBC Sports analyst, and we love watching Jeff on TV during all these telecasts. It's been a really interesting season.
It's good to be here.
Getting to this point, getting to the playoff.
I was kind of wondering the same thing.
Jeff, it's a pleasure to have you on. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to be here. Let's roll in here. And I was kind of wondering the same thing as you. Like, that's what sucks about being a multiple car team owner, is you can have one team that's just happy as hell, everything's great, and then another group's just down, and it's heck, any given Sunday can be like that. And I was wondering how the attitude would be here, because and I've been part of many of those things. It gets just so conflicted on how do you have the happiness and the sadness all at the same time.
It's an interesting problem to have. At least the boss is in the playoffs, so that's the good news, right? I'm curious from your perspective as an analyst. It was an interesting race, and I think everybody's happy for Chase Briscoe, certainly, to find a way in victory lane. But the race was all, you guys were all talking about Buescher and Wallace, and then it didn't matter at the end. How'd you feel about the way it played out, Jeff?
Well, look, I thought the race was incredible. You had Kyle Larson that pretty much dominated most of the night, and then Darlington's kind of like that. You're really good, you feel great about it, then you're not good late in the race. And trust me, I know I lost a lot of them like that there. But and then to see that battle, Kyle Busch, with all that's gone on at RCR over the last several weeks, Austin winning the race, having the ability to use that to move into the playoffs taken away, the appeal. Kyle Busch getting beaten by Harrison by inches at Daytona. Kyle Busch racing to get in the playoffs again. What a month for Richard Childress racing, and then Kyle, I think it's 19 years he's won a race, and he's trying to get that done again. Racing against a team that's going out of business. You can't make it up. When you really, you can't. And, the week before, Harrison winning, he's literally last in driver points, last, and he wins. Like, you can't. We were talking about it before we started this. Sports, you can't make it up. You know what I mean? You couldn't write it, and it's what's so fun about all sports and NASCAR in general, is that it is the most competitive it's ever been. In my lifetime, for sure, and any little thing can not work out for you, and Buescher not winning at Darlington, came back in position to win. He was struggling. I don't know that he'd have won the race if Reddick hadn't run into him, because he was starting to struggle with his car anyway. I don't know, But we do know he couldn't win after getting wrecked. We do know that, and it just shows you how close things are in this sport.
And he had the closest loss in the history of the sport at Kansas?
Yes.
Kansas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Forgot that. Yes.
And I was going to ask you about that, Jeff. If you talk about how the sport's changed, as I was looking up kind of stats and stuff before we came in here, you got these guys out there racing for 16th and being elated if they can get it. And back when I was looking up the stats when I first got here and you were here, you finished 11th in the points and crew chiefs are looking for jobs and stuff. Yeah. And now 16th is like, it is that much more competitive, or is it just a little bit of perception?
Well, so if you look at how close the cars run on speed on the racetrack, it's never been this close. I mean, Lee Diffie Sunday night in Darlington, I hit him at one point. We were like 30 laps into a run, and we got a bunch of screens and stuff in front of us, and one of them is timing and scoring. And I said, as undercarriage, I said, Lee, look at third place, and look at 27th, and they're all running within a tenth of a second of each other.
Wow.
I mean, we've never had that. Right. And I'm talking about at Darlington. I'm not talking about at Daytona. I'm talking about at Darlington. We've never had that. And so that has increased the intensity for sure for everyone. But the playoff system, it's like making the wild card game in the NFL. You're a pretty decent team, but not great. You might even have a losing season, but you made the playoffs. And now there's still life. There's at least one more week where you and your fans can go play. And so, I know there's some old traditionalists that don't like this point system, but from a standpoint of every race matters, every lap matters, every position matters, all that's real. It's all real. And we see it every single race. We see it. And in every playoff, we see a guy not transfer by a point, a tie, 2 points, like every single point matters. And we saw it again Sunday, Chris not making the race. I mean, you can go back and look at, one race and say, gosh, if we just would have had a better pit stop, or if we just would have done, whatever. And it's just shows you how the playoff system makes every single thing that much more important.
It truly does. And the playoffs start this week in Atlanta. Last time, I know it was a Fox race earlier in the season. Now you guys get the honor, but when Fox had the honor week 2, it was a doozy. It was some finish with Suarez there at the end. I'm pretty sure that was the one that was 3 wide there. It was crazy. Yep. It was like the Lightning McQueen finish from the movie Cars. Do you expect something similar? The Atlanta track, I think a lot of people didn't like it at first with some of the changes, but Chris Buescher even told me he's starting to learn to love it. What's your expectation for the weekend, Jeff?
I would say that most of the fans have liked it.
Yeah,
there was certainly some apprehension, because because it was a massive change. But and I think most drivers would prefer it the other way, the way it used to be. But from a fan standpoint, it's crazy to watch. And yeah, I expect. Look, here's the thing. I think what you have to do, in my opinion, is we now are down to three race playoffs, right? And then a final race. So there's a 3-race schedule. And anyone that's looking past that 3-race schedule, other than people preparing the cars, but driver, crew chief, it's 3 races and you got to get it done. And then when you look at Atlanta, it's a drafting type of racetrack. They're going to be in a big pack. There's going to be wrecks. Pit road is weird because you have a different way to different speeds entering pit road. You enter on the back straightaway. You got a chance to make mistakes there. Great chance to get in a wreck. That's Atlanta. Then the next week we go to Watkins Glen. It's a completely different tire. They're talking about over 20, 25 laps. The tire's slowing down 4 seconds. Yeah. I mean, that's massive. Okay, so you got that. Then you go to Bristol. Remember the spring race at Bristol where we had tire failure after tire failure after tire failure? Taking the same tire. So you've got 3 races that are potential wild card races and very unique. So I don't think anyone can go into Atlanta feeling like, if I just get out of this race because it's the drafting track without getting in a wreck, I'm going to be okay. Because then they're met with 2 complete unknowns. And what kind of race are we going to get at Bristol? Are you going to have to ride around and just save tire? I mean, we don't know. So I just think all of those things make this round I would say even more wild than the rounds when we had Talladega and the Roval in it. I think this is even potentially more wild than that.
How do you, with your analyst hat on, feel Brad is suited for the tracks coming up? Whether it's Atlanta, whether it's Watkins Glen, whether it's Bristol, certainly different animals, as you just said. Keselowski's been around long enough to have a track record on all of them. How do you feel about his chances to get out of this round?
So the big concern for me is Watkins Glen for Brad. They've ran better this year on road courses, but the last several years they haven't run that great. They've been, and I don't have any stats in front of me, but just eyeball test. I remember thinking the 6 cars not been very quick on road courses, but at the same token, I feel like this year they have had more speed. So that to me is the initial standout. If he's been very good at drafting style racetracks, been one of the best in my opinion at knowing how to be aggressive and when to be aggressive. That's worked for him sometimes it hasn't, which is every driver in the field. And then Bristol, if we do get that wild race like we had in the spring, then a guy like Brad whose experience can really matter comes into play. The problem there is, where are you in points at that time, right? So what's wild to me about Bristol is what kind of race can you afford to run? So if you have this point cushion and you start having issues with tires, you can approach it one way. But if you are trying to make up points or have to gain a certain amount of points, now how do you approach it? So, but Brad's experience and ability make him, and I also think hunger. I think it matters. I think that Brad, as good of an owner as he is and as good of a teammate as he is, he's also a human and a race car driver. And the 17 winning all those races last year, I don't care what anybody says, didn't sit well with him. He was glad it was happening to them. Don't get me wrong, but he wanted to be him. He's a race car driver. We're all like that. And so I think going into the playoffs with RFK on his shoulders, he's the guy, he's the team. I think that double, triple motivates him, and I think motivation matters. I think point in your life and in your career matters. Brad's smart enough to know that there's less racing ahead of him than it was behind him, because of his age.
Sure. And
this is an opportunity, and it's also an opportunity to take all the work that he's put into building this company back up, and it's all right in front of him now, and it's on his shoulders. And I actually think that's good for Brad. I think he likes that.
You talk about not wanting to go into Bristol like that. It's kind of like where Bubba Wallace was the other night, right? Like, he was running great, but he's 5 points out.
Yeah.
And you get to a place, what do you do? I mean, there's only so many positions you can pick up, and the guys,
sometimes
that's where you don't want to
be. Sometimes there's no good answer, right? And you just got to make a decision. Am I going to go be aggressive, or I'm going to not? Because there's no in between, right? You're either aggressive or you're not, and there's very little in between.
And then there's a whole scenario where somebody just comes and wins it out of nowhere, and you're gone anyway. So it's there's a lot of variables. It's very interesting.
There is that. We have noticed that a little bit lately, haven't we?
Absolutely.
Were you surprised? We'll take a break here in a second, and we'll get into your years at Roush. But were you surprised we had that many winners this year? I mean, it was really just one at large spot that was for the playoffs.
Not really. I mean, when you look at the playoffs today, I remember Truex missed the playoffs a few years ago. He was 4th or 5th in points.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's tight. I mean, I think when you go in, I think if you look at, and I don't have stats in front of me, but I think if you go into a year, you have to number one, win. And if you can't win, you have to assume you're going to have to be top 7 or 8 in points to get in. And it's really, and I don't have them in front of me, but that needs to be your mindset, because that's just where we are. It's this competitive, and without that mindset of when you go to the Daytona, well, heck, they do pay points for the duels now too. So when you go to run the duels, you better be thinking right then and there about what do we need to do as a team when all is said and done. If we hadn't won a race, how are we going to be top 8? And that's hard to do. That's really hard to do.
This is fun so far. I cannot wait for the rest of the hour. We're hanging out with the legend. Jeff Burton is with us, who was a Roush racer for about a decade, I guess 8 years, had a lot of success, won a bunch of races. We'll get into those years. We'll talk about his son and the excitement of Daytona a couple weeks ago. It was a blast seeing him in the booth and the excitement watching his kid cross the finish line. So all that's on the way. Stick around. It's Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio Channel 90. We're back here. It's Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing on Sirius XM NASCAR Channel 90. Chris Childers, Kevin Woods hanging out today with RFK. And we got a great guest with us, very special guest. Jeff Burton is with us, the legendary race car driver and NBC Sports analyst. And it's been a blast to watch those guys on TV the last several weeks as we've been watching this season unwind. As now we are in playoff mode. Atlanta is the racetrack this weekend. Brad Keselowski in the playoffs as the 8th seed. He is driving the Kings Hawaiian Ford Mustang this weekend. And Chris Buescher will be back in that 17 Fastenal, even though not in the playoffs. Certainly racing for a lot of pride. And I would imagine the number 6 could use some help. He could use some help along the way. So that'll play into it as well. One of the reasons 17's not in is because a Burton won a race a couple of weeks ago in Daytona, which took one of the spots. Jeff's son Harrison. It was really cool to watch it for any race fan, to watch a father in that moment, to see his son, the emotion, looking back at it now. You had a lot of great moments in racing yourself, but how did that one with your son in Daytona stack up?
So I think that the bad moments I had in racing made that one mean more because I know what he's been dealing with, and I didn't. He's handled it. He's handled his last few years just remarkably well, and I've been super proud of that. And you know, I had some really down times in my career, and there were moments of, you know, either in or you're out, right? And every time I found a way, almost every time I found a way to make sure that I was doing everything I could do to get back, you know, and I did. I kind of had 3 careers, as weird as that sounds, and I was watching Harrison go through that, and I knew the pain and the agony and all of those things he was going through. And I was going through them in my late 20s, early 30s. He's 21, 22, 23, and it's a different level of understanding when you're that age, just because of your maturity level and you haven't been through it so much. So seeing him not quit, even after he got fired, kind of keeping his, you know, obviously he had some down times, but when he couldn't, he didn't feel good about it. He found a way to fake it, and sometimes you have to for a few days to get yourself through it, right? And so he was able to find a way to keep his team behind him, for him to stay with his team on top of that, for neither one to give up on each other, and then win and do it beating Kyle Busch. And that's a compliment to Kyle Busch, not a negative.
Hey, legend.
Yes, and so it wasn't just that he won a race, because trust me, they're special, but it was how he persevered to win the race, and his never, you know, I just tell my kids all the time, don't quit. You're either in or you're out. As long as you're in, don't quit. If you're gonna quit, then quit and get the hell out, whatever it is you're doing. And he did that, and it worked. And so I saw it as a moment in his life that he can look back at and say, you know, don't quit. And then bigger picture, I think the millions of fans got that too. You know, I think the millions of fans got that. And I didn't have that perspective that night. But later, you know, when I went back and watched it, I'm like, yeah, I mean, that went through to the fan base. And it was a reminder to all of us that your attitude, your effort, your dedication in bad times matters more in bad times. You know, it's pretty damn easy when it's good times. But in bad times, you know, when the door's shut, no one's around you, how do you behave? And I think it was a reminder to all of us that were watching, like you can overcome the odds, but you can't quit. And I don't know. I didn't have that perspective that night, but I did the next day.
Now, I'm sure it wasn't lost on you. You won that same event 25 years earlier.
So I didn't know that number. I didn't know, and I until right now I didn't know that.
Nice.
But Ward won the 500.
Yeah.
I won the 400. Harrison won the 400. I won a duel down there. I don't think Ward won a duel. And so, if Jeb can find a way to win at Daytona, we'd have it covered up. But for the three of us to win at Daytona, Ward and I both won Darlington, and that for our family is big. Like, that's a big deal for us. And for both of us to have won at Daytona and now add another one, that's big for us too.
I'm always fascinated by racer families, and I am curious. Is there anybody in the family or any buddies that thinks this whole thing is insane? I mean, there's so many layers of racing in the Burton family. Is there like an aunt or a mom or a grandma or somebody, an uncle that's like, you guys are all nuts?
Oh yeah, I'd say all of them. But we've been doing it so long now. Our middle brother Brian. Most people are like, "Who? You have a brother? So you have another brother?" Yeah. Our middle brother Brian won more go-kart races than Ward and I did combined.
Oh really? No way.
More races, more championships.
Yeah.
And he did. He went to college, did his stuff. He always wanted. My grandfather had a construction company. My father bought it from him. Now my brother Brian has bought it from him, and that's what he always wanted to do. And when he saw what Ward and I were doing, he's like, you are nuts. Like, there's no way this is going to work out. And I think the year I finished, I finished fifth or something, and it was still in New York. In my acceptance speech for fifth, I said, my mom said that you couldn't make a living doing this, and as they handed me a check for, however many millions, right? Because my mom's like, you guys, like, you got to go to school. You got, and Ward and I weren't the schooling type, but yeah, I mean, it's now normal. It's now what we do, but those early years was a little touch and go.
It's funny you say that because people forget that was kind of the make or break of the year, right? You were on stage in New York, or you just a dismal failure.
Exactly. And sitting in there, and I tell you, like, I never won a championship, and every one of those damn things I went to and have to listen to other people talk always made me mad. But you had to go. You didn't have a choice.
Part of the job, right? It's a part of the job. Jeff Burton is our guest here, Sirius XM NASCAR Radio, Channel 90, Backstretch Banter with RFK. He was a Roush driver, a Roush guy back in the day. You've seen this team evolve. Give me perspective of your opinion of Roush Fenway Keselowski. You were a part of it when it was R, then the F joined, and now there's the RFK. Two competitive vehicles, certainly. I think the new car has played into that, and the next gen car has kind of given this team a boost, and they've taken advantage of it. Been very competitive, nearly had two in the playoffs, but you've lived it. You were there when they moved to Concord. What do you make of it now, sitting in the headquarters?
Yeah, let me build on that a minute, Jeff. Talk about that, because I know they'd ran multiple teams here, but I know the plan kind of changed to move the teams to Concord with you and Mark. I know that was kind of a shift in kind of the way this company operated. And if you could just kind of tell that story and how you ended up here and how that worked.
Yeah, so we, Mark and I had started becoming closer as teammates, as friends. And Jeff Smith and Jack Roush wanted to expand. And I'm like, okay. And so let's bring Mark to Mooresville at the time. And they're like, no, we're not going to do that. That's, we got to keep Mark up there. And I'm like, nah, I think that's what we should do. And so there was a bit of resistance to that. And even Mark at the end, he got nervous and was like, we can't do it. But we ended up doing it, and we won a lot of that. Combination was magic. And we won a lot of races. And then Mark and I had a great relationship. He pushed me as a driver and as a person. And at the time, I was heavily involved in the race cars and how we were building them, and I always had Mark's best interest at heart. Was always making sure that we both had good the best we knew how to build. They weren't always good, but we were doing the best we knew how, and so we were there together. And then when then Jack was wanting to put us all in one building. He was talking about building a complex in Concord, and then this became available, and they acquired this, and everything got moved over here, and it was a completely different look at it, because a lot of race teams have multi-car teams, but they were like, the Stavolas, when they had two race teams, Bobby Allison and Bobby Hillen, they had two complete race teams, buildings, shops, and two completely different engine builders at their same facility. They had two different people, two different machine shops. That's wild. So Jack's like, that's foolishness. Like, that's crazy. We're going to all do this together. And so putting us all in this complex together, even though the teams were split up from one building to the next, we were working together on a level that was completely different, because before we were hour and a half away from each other, and now we were across the street. So it was a completely different look, and it required us all to think differently too, which ultimately was the right way to do it. But there were some growing pains doing it.
If you look with you guys, as I was looking at it, from 97 to 01, you won 17 races and finished in the top 5 in the points. I don't know, 3 or 4. When you guys are really coming along as a 99 team, as a formidable contender for the championship during that time. When you look back at that, did you realize at that time exactly how strong you guys were running?
We were pretty confident. We had a good system. It was a simple system, which everybody thinks Jack is a mathematician. A lot of people think Jack's an engineer. So you would think that Jack would build a team around engineering and all this stuff, when in fact Jack liked it simple. He liked the way that he wanted the driver and the crew chief to be holding hand in hand, standing next to each other, figuring out how to build the race cars the best they could, how to race them the best they could. And Mark and we fit right in that mold. It was perfect timing for us. And Jack Jack wasn't easy to work for, because he was very demanding. But if he could afford it, you'd get it. If you could make the case that we need this, he'd give it to you. And it was just really good timing in the way that the structure of NASCAR, what it took to be successful, the strengths that we had. I wish we could have done it 10 years before that. Had we been able to started it 10 years before that, we would have won a ton of races and a ton of championships, because at that time, it just wasn't as technical as it is now, and it fit right in our wheelhouse.
When I look back, I tell people a lot, because I think people forget things over time, how exactly integral you were in the operation here with the build of the cars and what was going on. I mean, you were a big deal.
I was a big pain in the butt. Yeah, I mean, look, that was one of my strengths, and Tony Liberati, Rambo, that worked here for a long time. When we won Texas, he and I set the car up. He and I, bump steered the car. And then I worked Charlie Libby, and which is that whole crowd. We worked together, hanging bodies, and I was knee deep in it. And we had moved here. My wife and I had moved here, and Paige, who's getting married next year, she was newborn, and I'd come home at 8 o'clock at night. And Paige would be asleep, and my Kim would be like, "Where you been?" "I've been at work," and she was here by herself, but she never complained, because we were working. And but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and it was hard. It was a lot of work. And like I said, Jack was demanding, but if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change any of that. It was fun.
When you look back on that era, what's your favorite moment, your favorite win, or it don't have to be a win, but what stands out? What's your lasting memory of that time frame?
I think just when you get with the right group of people at the right time, Buddy Parrott, Mark, Jimmy Finning, who's still here, myself, Jack. It just, we were all aligned, and that's hard to do. And when Mark would win, I was so happy for him, and when I would win, he was so happy for me. We were also disgusted that we didn't win, but it just was the relationships. I think it was the teamwork, the camaraderie. Look, man, we built the '99 car. We went to Daytona, and our backup car was an Oldsmobile. And the car we rolled into we finished fifth in the Daytona 500, and our backup car was a Rob Moroso Oldsmobile. That was the backup car. We had one car that Liberty that Jack said, hey, you guys got to provide one car. And we had it at the track days, and we used to go to Road Atlanta after the last race of the year, and we'd spend 2 days there giving rides. Mm-hmm. And one of Jack's buddies crashed it. And when I say crashed it, I mean destroyed it. That was the only car we had. That was it. So, and that was at the end of the year. When we got back, they were redoing the floors in the shop. We didn't have a place to work, so we went to the Daytona 500 with crazy. Literally a primary and an Oldsmobile as a backup, and we had two cars that were built. That's how we started the '99, and we went to Atlanta that year, second in points.
So when you look at that from building that in the late '90s and the early 2000s, and what it was built into, which you could arguably say was the strongest team in the sport there for a 7 to 8 year span.
Oh, yeah.
So to help be a part of that, what was there a lot of sense of pride there?
Well, and then even when I left, remember all five teams got put in was then called the Chase. All five teams here made the Chase, and I mean people were raising hell about it, and it just like I said, it was timing. It was the timing of everybody being their best at the right time, and yeah, Roush Racing was, for a great deal of time, was one of the teams you had to beat. We didn't win as many championships as I wish we had them, for sure. We won those two, and but you know, you had to race us, and when we showed up, people knew that we were there and we were going to be competitive, and it was fun because you knew when you pulled out on a racetrack, people were watching you.
Talk about when it became time to leave. Was that a weird thing? Was it weird to wake up one day and be somewhere else? Well,
I mean, look, I you know, it. Again, I've said this 1,000 times, but that one was just same thing. Like it was, we had a year of not being sponsored, and we were a team that people picked to win the championship, and then 2 years later we didn't have a sponsor, and the economy was bad. A lot of things happening. Jack never. We didn't race like we didn't have a sponsor. We didn't do anything different. Nothing. But it was hard to go to racetracks with a white car or a black car with nothing on it was humiliating, and it was hard to get people to want to work on the team because they were, you know, all the other car owners took advantage of that. Hey, when that team's going out of business, they don't have sponsorship, They would use that against us, and then at the same time we weren't running well, and at the same time Carl Edwards was here,
right?
And so I had an opportunity to go drive for Richard to help, not just drive, but help him kind of rebuild his program, and if I left, Carl Edwards is sitting there. And so, you know, I told Jack, I said, man, you got Carl Edwards there. You need to. And Jack said, well, I don't know if he's ready. And I'm like, Jack, he's ready. Like, that's your guy. And I left here talking to Jeff Smith about, you know, what I needed to do the following year. The first person I called was Carl Edwards. I said, dude, this team is ready. I promise you. We've been struggling. The right group is here. Now's the time. Like, go do what you got to do to get this ride. And I told Jack that you need. And then all that was with Jack was over the phone because he wasn't here. But when we met at Watkins Glen face to face, hell, I cried. I mean, I cried. You know, cried like a baby, because he meant then and does now. It meant a lot to me because he gave me the freedom and the trust to do the things that I thought was best on the racetrack. And he let me do that. And do you know how much confidence building that is for a guy that you hardly even know to say, you and Buddy Parrott do the way you want to do it? And he did. And we went to that race at Atlanta. We were second in points. Dale Jarrett with the 88 car had a new team. We had a new team with a 99. He was first in points, and we were second. And we missed the race because we didn't have any points yet. The next week would go off of this year's points. It was working off of last year. We didn't have any points.
Right.
So I just sucked. I just wasn't good at Atlanta, and we didn't qualify for the race. And I was sitting in the car that I wanted the chassis, sitting in the car that I wanted the body hung the way it was hung, that I wanted set up the way it was set up, everything that I could have ever asked for. A great group of people, and I missed the race. And Jack walked down there, and he said, I'm sorry. And I said, yeah, man, I'm sorry. He says, no, I didn't provide you what you needed to be successful today. And I'm like, Jack, you've given me everything that I could have ever wanted is sitting right here. The people, the cars, the equipment, it's all here. And he would not let me shoulder that. He says, I got it. And he, with the sponsors, he took it. And he didn't deserve it because he gave me everything that I wanted. And I'll never forget that. As long as I live, I'll never forget that. He had my back at a time when he could have easily just pointed the finger and said, no more for you. You've proven you can't do it. He doubled down on me and said, nope, it's on me. And that was a major point in my life that has meant something to me, not only that day, but I think about it almost every day because, very few people would have done it that way.
Well, when Jeff,
pretty special.
When
Pretty
Jeff
damn
says
special.
When Jeff says they struggled mightily in that car, I think your worst season was 12th in the points. So we talk about that perception with some of the changes in rules. If
well,
it was
thanks
now,
for saying that.
Because now you'd be like 4 straight playoff appearances and a super success. So
yeah.
it was a different time.
Yeah.
But I do remember you leaving, and it was weird. It was a weird time for the entire organization because you had been such a big part of it. And while Carl, stepped in the seat and did a fine job, there was still a hole in the organization.
He did a great job, and that
took a while.
And that was. I told my wife and Russell Branham, who worked for me then, I'm like, look, Roush needs to change. I need to change. It's good for both of us. And I said, but I don't want to hear a word from either one of you two because they're going to whip our ass for the next 18 months. And they're like, what? And I said, I'm telling you, they're going to kick our ass. All of next year, they're going to kick our ass. And I don't want when the race is over, I don't want either one of you ask me why you didn't run good. I don't want to hear crap from either one of you. Just don't say a word about performance because we're going to get our butts whipped. And we did. We got our butts whipped. And but the next year we didn't.
I was going to say,
we didn't,
when you did find success at Childress, did it mean that much more to you?
Well, it did because I was. Look, I was not as good of a race car driver as Mark Martin or Kurt Busch or Matt Kenseth or, I wasn't. And
you're saying you're better than Biffle, though. Is that what you meant?
I was better than Biffle. No, I'm about the same as Biffle. But my strength was out of the race car. My strength was in the decision-making about what are we going to do to be ready for this race from a car standpoint. That's what that was, and I worked really hard at that. And that was my strength. And so to be able to go be part of, not the reason, part of why RCR got back to running well, that did mean a lot to me. And I went 4 years without winning a race and won a race there. So it was the 12th in points thing. Yes, it felt horrible, but it wasn't that bad, but it felt terrible.
Understood. How was it like to be back in victory lane again after that amount of time?
Oh man, it was huge. And beat Matt Kenseth on that day actually. And what was special about it was that Greg and Matt and Jack and Mark, and all the people that I stood here hand in hand with and fought the fight were the first ones to congratulate me. And that picture hanging on my wall today is Matt Kenseth, us door to door, driver to driver on the racetrack at Dover after that race, high-fiving each other. That picture hangs on my wall because that relationship that we had, that we built here, even on a day where I won, he was happy for me.
Jeff Burton is our guest here on Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing. Let's take a break. We'll finish up. We'll get some final thoughts with Jeff next right here. It is SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, Channel 90. We're back here, Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing, SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. I'm your host, Chris Childers. Kevin Woods with me today, my co-host from RFK, and with us is the great Jeff Burton from NBC and legendary racer who was with Roush and had great success with this team. Kevin, I know you were anxious to ask another one, so go ahead, sir.
I just had one more question, Jeff. I've always been curious about this with any athlete. Once the driving career is over, the move into the broadcast booth. I think a lot of people probably think that's a really easy move or something that's more simple, or you're kind of retired. But it seems to me like it's probably we've seen people do it that maybe weren't quite prepared enough to do it, and it doesn't come off very well. And can you talk about how much work goes into that and what that transition is like?
Were you describing me there?
No, not you. You've done a great job.
So, I didn't know a thing about television other than doing interviews and that type of stuff. I did a few things for ESPN a long time ago. I called some IROC races, I believe, and then I also had a little segment during like RPM the night or something. But I didn't know how TV worked, and didn't, especially live television, other than those few experiences. And so we did a few. Steve Letarte and I, with Rick Allen, did a few pretend races. We went to Daytona, we went to Michigan, we went to Stanford where there's a studio. We did a few races. And then they just turned us loose, and they gave us a few guidelines per se, and some of those are pretty simple, like don't say something about somebody that you wouldn't say in front of them. It's a pretty good rule of life. We were encouraged to give our opinions, don't hold back, give our opinions, and they just kind of turned us loose. And so I don't know if I was prepared for it or not. I much like Jack did with me, Sam Flood and Jeff Binky did with Steve and I. And it was like, we trust you. We'll give you some guidelines, give you some structure, but go do it. Go do your thing. And we're Steve and I are still working together today. Rick is as well. It's fun. Like it's what's fun about it is racing is there's those days where you leave and you're just so mad, so mad, sad, frustrated, whatever. I don't get that in the booth, and I remember leaving my first race, and it was a race where Austin Dillon went through the fence at Daytona in the middle of the night, like at 2 a.m. or something, and that terrified me because it happened right in front of me. I'm like, oh my God, and I left there, and I'm like, well, I don't have to look at the points to see where I am in points. I don't have to see who I pissed off and got to talk to tomorrow. I don't have to that's pretty cool. And so it's intense, it's fun, it's live, which I love. But it also is a great way to transition into another phase of your life, and doing it with something that I love racing and I love the NASCAR racing in general and specifically, but it's an honor to do it. It's an honor to do it, to be able to talk to the fans on a weekly basis. It's really cool.
How much weekly preparation do you put into it?
So that's a good question. So the way I describe it is 24/7, because I don't have a period in the day where I say, okay, every Tuesday I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read through something. My preparation is being in the sport and knowing the people and just having conversations. You know what I mean? Like I think that you have to know the people, but you don't know what's going to happen. It's live television. I think sometimes you can over prepare. Like I don't know what's going to happen going to Atlanta. I have no idea. And that's what the beauty of it. Let's go watch qualifying, see who's fast. Let's let it develop in front of us. We need to know the people involved. But I don't need to know stats, and I'm an analyst. You know what I mean? They don't need me to roll off. Well, he finished 5th here last year. Who cares? It's today, and that's how I approach it. We have an advantage of other sports. In other sports, you cover a different team every week. You know, here we cover the same people every week. You're going to a different track, and so it's for me. It's just more knowing the people involved and just having conversation with them.
A beautiful conversation indeed, and we love it. We love watching you each and every weekend. It's a lot of fun. Atlanta is this weekend. It is Backstretch Banter with RFK, Jeff Burton, our guest here. So my last question for you would be about something you just brought up, because you mentioned when you were a driver, sometimes you'd have to call people the next day that you pissed off. How many calls normally do drivers have to make that next day when things get a little messy?
It's not that often. The ones that pissed me off are the ones that didn't call me.
Yeah, sure.
You know, like look, I get it, man. We all make mistakes. I mean, I've wrecked people, and I've made mistakes, but I'd go and try to make it right as you can make it, right? And
sure.
I wrecked Jimmy Johnson at Bristol one time, and when the race was over, I walked right into his hauler with all those crew guys are big. I walked right up in there, and he was hot, and he deserved to be. And I just walked in there, and I'm like, hey, man, like, that's on me. I got nothing. I just messed up. And he told me years later that like, how much that meant to him, that he knew that I was willing to come in there, walk through all those people, put my put my safety in jeopardy. Because when those doors shut, man, there's stuff happens in those trailers.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. You just have to do that. And
sure.
Even if you do it because someone deserves it, you need to have that conversation too. Because there are times that you need to say, in this sport, the way it is, like, part of keeping people from doing things to you that you don't want them to is them knowing that you do it to them. Mm-hmm. It's that, or they have to respect you enough because you don't do it to them, unless it's an accident. But if you wait on NASCAR to make all those calls, you're gonna be upset.
Yeah.
You gotta, and that's the beauty of the sport. To be honest with you, people have to know that a deterrent is, okay, that guy will do it to me, right? And if you're not willing to, they'll take advantage of you.
Jeff Burton, a pleasure to talk to you, man. Thank you so much. Thanks for being a part of the show.
Thank you. It's fun.
Absolutely. Kevin Woods, pleasure hanging out today. Want to thank our fabulous crew, Alec Walt, our producer in DC for SiriusXM. Thomas Burfield puts all this on. Brandon Lee, fantastic, and Elijah Burke. We appreciate him as well. I'm Chris Childers for Kevin Woods. We appreciate you listening. It is Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. Enjoy the playoffs.